A Java with John, a Java with John. Grab a cup of Java and sit on down and have some Java with John.
Hello, my name is John, and this is my Java. Well, welcome to another episode of Java with John. Last week I was pretty sick. This week I'm feeling better. Still have a bit of problems with my voice, but it's about 95% recovered. So bear with me if I cough a little bit. I got to clear my throat or drink a little more coffee than usual. So on my last episode I had some good reports on it. People seemed to like it, although people didn't think I should have done it when I was sick. But like I said in the last video, I gotta drudge through stuff. One of my friends said that he felt so bad for me, he wanted to take me out and shoot me. So not sure if that was feeling bad for me or more of a desire. But anyways, we're gonna move on today. We're gonna talk about the functional analysis, and it's what's referred to as ABC. Some people are taught that in psychology courses they take. I was taught when I went to school for my child and youth care diploma. Something I find very valuable when trying to analyze a client's behavior, even analyzing other people's behaviors in general. It's really, really useful. So I want to talk a bit about that because this is going to help you whether you're caring for clients like children, youth, adults, older people, whether you're in relationships with friends. It's going to help you in general in life just to be a little bit more aware of what triggers somebody, what kind of behaviors they may have, and kind of how you should respond to that. So, why do they call it ABC? Because it's ABC. A is for antecedent. And what antecedent is, it's really the trigger. What triggers the B, which is behavior. Now, a lot of things can trigger people, whether it's a bad phone call, whether it's if you're dealing with children, it could be bedtime, chore time, homework time, meal time, going to school, coming home from school, preparing for a home visit, coming home from a home visit. If you're in a relationship, it could be finances, going out to parties. Someone may like to party, the other person may not like to party. It could be, if you're getting married, there's lots of triggers around that because it's a very stressful situation, right? Children, right? As couples get into disagreements and stuff about children. So if it's friends, you had a bad conversation, you're not getting along, me sometimes when I make sarcastic comments, that can kind of set things off. Your friend is maybe at a different place than you are, you want to get together for coffee, they don't want to get together. So just a whole bunch of things can be triggers for behaviors. So when we talk about behaviors, we're going to go to the B now. Behaviors. There's two types of behaviors, general types of behaviors. We're going to call it verbal and nonverbal behaviors. Now, verbal behaviors, of course, could be the yelling, swearing, laughing, the cackling, cursing, threatening. So those are some types of verbal behaviors. Now, nonverbal behaviors, there's a lot more. Clenching of the fists, the whitening of the knuckles, some people have that vein in their forehead that pops out, nostrils flaring, red-faced, making this with their fists. It could be posturing, standing in an intimidating posture, leaning forward, leaning backward. So there's lots and lots of types of non-verbal behaviors. And, again, me with the vision problem, I don't pick up non-verbal behaviors in terms of maybe the physical stats, stuff like that. But non-verbal behaviors could also be grunts. They call that paralanguage. But for me, it's sometimes the energy the person is projecting too is sometimes what I pick on as well for me as a non-verbal behavior. So depending how that behavior happens or what kind of behaviors are displayed will depend on the C. The C stands for consequence. And I want to, I'm just going to grab a coffee here. So the C can be good or bad. So basically the definition of a consequence is the result of a behavior. So if it's a good behavior, there could be a good consequence. If there's a bad behavior, there could be a bad consequence. So, for example, the antecedent could be you ask the child to do their homework. Behavior could be they start yelling and swearing and cursing, and they don't want to do their homework. So the consequence might be you might say, look, you're going to get an extra 5 minutes of reading time because of your behavior. So I also want to stretch the envelope a little bit. And I know we're talking about negative behaviors and negative consequences, but I also want to talk about positive consequences, because we can't forget about that either. Because it's important when you see a positive behavior to reward someone with a positive consequence. Okay, so what I mean by that is, if you ask a child to do their homework, and they usually have difficulty doing their homework, and then they do it this time without difficulty, the consequence might be like, oh, good job, Bobby, you know what, did a really good job on your homework, so you know what, you can stay up a bit later tonight to watch your favorite show, so that we can get through this movie, because I really appreciate you doing your homework. So a consequence doesn't have to be bad, it can be good. Also, a consequence, you know, how they say, quote, a punishment should fit the crime. Well, a consequence should do that as well. So a consequence, the two types of consequences are natural consequences and logical consequences. Natural consequences are when you allow the environment to dish out the consequence unless safety is an issue. And what I mean by that is, for example, if it's cold outside and I'm going to say this, a normal functioning child doesn't want to wear their hat and mitts to school, you might say, look, put your hat and mitts in your bag. If you don't want to wear them, that's fine. You know, so, you know, they may want to appear tough, but who knows, a block down the road, they might take out that hat and mitts and put them on, and at least they have them because it's cold. Now, the reason why I say a normal functioning child, because some children, like for example, with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, they might not have that gauge to feel hot and cold. And if it's really, really cold outside, you may have to get into that, you know, you need to wear your hats and mitts. And so we're just going to put them on you and stuff like that, because again, safety is an issue at that point in time. So just like if a child, regardless of the normal function and non-normal functioning, runs out into the highway, runs out into a busy street, you're going to have to go get them off that busy street. You don't want them to get hit by a car. But where natural consequences might come into play is a kid is bugging another peer, and you know, or your child is bugging their brother and sister, and so the brother and sister doesn't want to play with them later, and that's just natural consequences. You're not intervening. Logical consequences is consequence where the adult intervenes and they dish out a consequence. So, for example, if your child doesn't come in on time for curfew, you might have them, you know, tomorrow night they can't go out, or they got to come in that amount of time earlier. That is a logical consequence because you're intervening. The key with logical consequences, and logical consequences are beautiful, but the other thing is they need to be impactful. So, for example, if your child doesn't care if he's coming in early from curfew, then what's the point of giving that consequence? What if they care about, say, their Game Boy? Might be, look, you came in late from curfew, you know, you're going to have to come in early from your curfew tomorrow, plus you can't play you know, your video game system tomorrow, whether it's Game Boy, whatever it is, right? So you're giving a logical consequence, but you're also doing something that's impactful as well. So the interesting thing is that a consequence can become a trigger or an antecedent. So you got to be aware that when you give out a consequence, sometimes it's going to go back to that. It's going to be that antecedent and create some more, especially if it's negative, it's going to create some more negative behavior. That's not necessarily a bad thing because you know it's impacting them. So, and sometimes, you know, you can't keep on dishing out consequences if they get mad. Sometimes you just, after they display the behavior because you divvied out the first consequence, sometimes the next consequence might be just a conversation. Remember, consequence, cause and effect. Consequence is a reaction to an action, an effect of a cause. So that conversation might be just, look, you know, you have the consequence of no Game Boy and you got to come in early tomorrow. let's just, yeah, a little outburst, fair enough. Understand it's important for you to play your Game Boy. Let's just get through the next day. You're going to get it back a couple of days from now. So just, don't worry about it. I know it sucks, but better that than 3 or 4 days. So let's just kind of move on. And that's all it takes sometimes, is to help them realize that things could be worse. So that's the basic antecedent behavior consequence. And again, remember, it's a key to import. The couple of things to remember is that the consequence can become another antecedent. But remember, not only to consequence bad behavior, it's really, really important to, let's use the word consequence, but if you want to use the word reward, fine, reward the good behavior. Because when you reward the good behavior, you're more likely to see good behavior. And the child, the person, is more likely to display good behavior in the future because they're getting that attention, they're getting that acknowledgement for the good behavior. See, another thing is sometimes we tend to focus so much on negative behavior that, especially when people want to get our attention, they act negatively, because it's easier to get attention when you act negatively than it is to receive that attention when you act positively. Especially if the person responding to the behavior is stretched in many different ways. I found that in the group home. Children, teenagers, youth, whatever you want to call them, they would sometimes act negatively, not because they wanted to act negatively, but that's the way they got staff's attention, because staff was so busy putting out fires that we were drained sometimes, and we would pay much more attention and acknowledge much more the negative behavior than the positive behavior. And it's easy to miss, and it's easy for people on the other side to say, wow, why are you acknowledging that positive behavior? But when you're in the moment and 2 kids are acting up and 1 kid is acting positively, you have to do damage control first. So even if you do the damage control, whether you're a staff or a parent of a couple of kids, if you see one of your children acting properly when the other one is acting up, if you see one of your clients acting properly when another one is acting up, make sure after you deal with the negative behavior from the one child or the one client that you're dealing with the positive behavior from the other child or the other client, because that's going to make your job a lot easier in the future with that client who's acting positively. And the other thing I might do is, another side benefit is sometimes the client who's acting negatively or the child who's acting negatively might see that, we get good stuff if we act positively. So I'm going to conclude this episode of Java with John. Starting to get a bit hoarse here. As you know, I could talk for hours. But in the meantime, to all the broasters with the coasters, zap that like button, because I like you. And remember, be yourself, because nobody else can.